Hi, welcome to the 9 to 5 podcast. I'm Elliot.
Hey, and I'm Josh, and today our topic is how do we budget and do we have money dates?
So, Josh, do you and Lori ever actually sit down and talk about money, or is it just awkward glances when that credit card bill comes in?
It's usually some form of an awkward comment like, how did you spend this much money at whatever place?
I know
No,
those beers don't buy themselves, Josh.
that's right. Yeah, no, it's actually gotten a lot better. We were in that phase once upon a time, but we're no longer there.
Yeah, aren't we all? I am certainly a spreadsheet nerd, so yes, I have been like, what in the world is random vendor and why did we spend X amount of dollars here? So,
Yep.
yes.
Yep. So today we're diving into how we budget, what money dates look like, and how to actually make them fun.
Yeah, interested to see how we do that, Josh. So,
Yeah.
okay, before we get into money dates, let's talk basics. Why does budgeting even matter to us?
I think it matters for different reasons depending on what stage that you're in. So early on, for me, it was just getting a handle on our expenses, just our personal finances as a whole. Whenever Lori and I came together in our relationship and combined our finances, we had visibility of what our bills were, and then we needed to see what needs to be paid and when, and how to set aside and make sure we had enough money to pay those bills. And we can talk through the evolution of what that has looked like, but really it's just about getting on the same page and being able to communicate. And that sometimes is a struggle in relationships. It was a struggle for us early on. And there was probably a little bit more of the accusational, like poking of each other, like, how could you spend this much? And we didn't have the money for this.
Yeah,
How
you
about for
haven't.
you?
Yeah, I was going to say the same is true with Don and I. Certainly, budgeting, making us more aware of where our money is going, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the first step in anybody's kind of FI journey is, well, all right. A lot of people know what they're paid on probably an annual basis or on per hourly basis, but understanding what we actually spend and what we spend on, you may think we know, but in actuality, it's usually a pretty eye-opening exercise, I would say. So
Very true.
for me, it was, for Don and I especially, it was very eye-opening just to say, all right, hey, here's all our different line items. Here's our gas bill. Here's our internet. Here's
Hmm.
our money that we went out to eat. And mapping that really against a calendar to first make sure that we can pay those things, but then ultimately have the intentionality of understanding okay, this is how much money I have, and this is where it's all going before we can start to optimize.
Yeah, and for speaking of optimizing, for those of us on the fire journey, it's probably looking at the how much are we saving and how much are we investing. That's probably in a lot of cases one of the biggest line items, and we want to make sure that we have that as the one of the top priorities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw a question on Reddit the other day, and it was certainly a question that I've had even earlier in my FI journey was, we talk about savings rate and people were asking about, well, how do I actually calculate my savings rate? Is that off the gross number? Is it off the net number? And once again, all the complexities of how do we arrive at all this terminology that is thrown around in the kind of the ether, but making sure that it's discernible for everybody. So,
Yeah, I think that's a
but
really good topic. I just added that to our topic list because I think we could go into a deeper dive on savings rate at some point.
yeah, absolutely. So, I would say let's talk a little bit about how we budget today and maybe how does that differ from where we really started.
Sure. Yeah, so for me today, we do more of what I would call an anti-budget, where we're not necessarily looking at the amount of money that we are allocating to a specific category. We've exercised the ability to be able to know how and where our money is going over a period of time. So we've gotten comfortable with our spending habits, and we know we're not going to venture too far out of those. So nowadays, it's basically just do what we're going to do in our lifestyle on a day-to-day basis. And if occasionally we will have what we call more or less like just check-ins, where we're looking at these are the big expenses that are coming up, or maybe this is the thing that we need to watch out for that are coming up in the future that we need to make sure that we are talking about and we're on the same page about. We don't really have a built-in threshold. We just sort of talk through those things. So Lori might say, hey, I'm going to go shopping because I need to get something, whatever that might be. And she just kind of runs it by me. She lets me know that I'm probably going to spend $150 or whatever that might be. And same with me. I'm getting some podcast equipment. It's probably going to cost me a couple $100, but that's what I'm going to be spending. So that's kind
Yeah.
of how we talk about it now. If like something really big comes in, we will either talk about what strategy we're going to use to pay for that thing. We have rental properties, so we had to replace a water heater just a couple of weeks ago. What's the cost going to be? And then how are we going to pay for it? What credit card are we going to use? Which one's going to give us the most points? Those are the kind of conversations that we're having now, but it took us a long time to get to this point.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you and Lori have really gotten to the point of a very evolved budget and evolution of communicating effectively to each other, right? And the same thing with Dawn and I is when we started our relationship, of course, you kind of start at a place where you are trying to figure out just where's money going in and going out, but we budget in a very similar way that you do now. And I would say that is born out of the path where both you and I are in our own financial journeys. Once we first found financial independence, it was probably a lot of cutting and figuring out where can we optimize and things of that nature. But once you're further along the path and we've got the boring middle or whatever people like to call it, or like you being actually at FI, um, it's less about saving every little penny here and there, and it's more the awareness and making sure that we are communicating effectively with our partners to be able to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Are you okay with that? Just that awareness, because that's what you do in a relationship.
It's what you should do. Yeah.
Yeah. True, that is it is what you should do. So, of course, I mean, we have people that are going to be strict spreadsheet followers that are going to be, hey, I've allocated $300 to this type of expense for the month, and as soon as that level's been hit, it's going to be done. Versus what I think you and I have kind of more graduated to is kind of that high level awareness tracking.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and we started there. I mentioned in other conversations that we've had that we started with the cash jar system because we had very low financial intelligence. We were spending more than we were earning, and we needed to figure out a way to get our arms around that. And we started out with specifically allocating certain amount of dollars to like 5 different categories. And if we got to the end of the jar without getting into the end of the week, we did not spend any more on that. Or we would look for a way to say that we could pull from another jar. Ultimately, we did not spend more than what we had in the combined 5 jars. And that took a lot of discipline. It was hard. It led to probably some arguments and some challenges along the way. That's where we had to start from. And we always had what we called a budget, but it was more like a plan. It was a list of here's all of our we started this actually when Lori and I's relationship started. Before we even knew what financial independence was, we were putting together a list of here's all our bills, when they're due, and how much the amount is. And we thought that was a budget. Really, that was just a plan. That's just a list of expenses. It wasn't any kind of intention. There wasn't any kind of intention behind it to decide, should we be spending this amount of money? Can we afford this in these categories? And it didn't get down into the gas and groceries and all the variable expenses. It was just the hard fixed expenses like mortgage and, like you mentioned, your utilities and things like that. So it's definitely been an evolution for us.
Sure. Yeah. Just like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
So, my own path that I talked about a little bit in the origin story was at one point I was $35,000 in credit card debt. And that was the exact same way that I did it, was just pen and paper, writing it all down to say, what are my obligations that I have? How am I going to do this to actually get out of it? Is you actually have to adhere to those numbers
Hmm.
and to be able to chip away at things like debt, or once you get out of debt to actually make sizable savings, you have to increase that distance between what you actually spend and what you actually are earning to be able to invest that money and ultimately allow it to grow and compound and do all the good things that we all love.
Yeah. So when you were doing more of that strict budgeting, were you using any specific software back then?
When I started, probably at that time, and what I would think is the easiest way from just the most understandable is just old pen and paper. And I
Hmm.
know that's boring or maybe antiquated, whatever. But to me, is marrying that up with a calendar to say, like, okay, I have my utility bill due on X date, and I have my mortgage payment due on Y date, and I have whatever else. Total all those fixed expenses up and say, yep, hey, I've got all of this that I got to decrement from the money that I'm bringing in. Those are my non negligibles. But then, of course, we have floating expenses or discretionary, whatever term you want to use, you know, going out to eat. Certainly not a requirement, but I would say it's certainly a line item in a lot of people's budgets. And so you
Hmm.
can ratchet that up or down based off of difference in what you want to be able to save and what you're able to save.
Yeah, I'll go off on a little bit of a tangent here for just a moment. I see this with my kids now as they're becoming young adults. They have these expenses, but they don't necessarily know where they fall in the month or how many of them fall during pay cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much of it that's automated now that they're not as in tune with the withdrawal of that money, so that they're just further removed from it and they're not
Sure.
feeling it in the same way. Even though we had a very basic plan that we called a budget where we listed out all of those things, it at least gave us that first step of an awareness that here's all the things that need to be paid over a period of time. I get paid here, Lori gets paid here, and we kind of would map that out through the month and see that we can pay all these bills and maybe a couple of them from the in between the next pay period here. She'll kind of use that as a guide to say, I'm going to pay all these bills, I'm going to pay these credit cards, whatever it might be. She's usually working in the future. She's not waiting until the day before to make that payment. She's paying it a couple of weeks in advance. And that's again going back to like the psychological approach of just really knowing and having a closer relationship with your money is very beneficial. If you can at least start the conversation, if we're thinking about this from the perspective of where do we even begin to create a budget, it's writing down all of your expenses and the amount of pay that you're going to get with the dates and everything associated with it. And then we can start talking about, okay, how do we allocate the extra money to the other things that we want to do that might not be our fixed bills and fixed expenses.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you once again hit the nail on the head. I guarantee there's studies out there that show like you're going to spend less money probably if you're paying in cash. Actually, physically watching money leave your hands. I'm sure it's has to do with loss aversion and things of that nature. I mean, you're going to be more cognizant of it than the digital ones and zeros moving from one account to a next.
Hmm.
It's so much easier and Amazon's gotten very wealthy off such a thing.
Back to money
So,
dates.
yeah, back to money dates here. Do we want to walk through maybe some of our actual systems? What's your system look like today?
Yeah, so it's not very complex at all. When it comes to a money date, we just talk about what's coming up, what major expenses we foresee, what kind of things should we watch out for, and we just kind of run ideas or expenses past each other. I think we have grown our financial muscles strong enough that we know how to stay in our lane, essentially. And we will touch base as needed. Usually, Lori handles a lot of the day to day stuff, and I'm more of like the longer term, I'd say big picture thinker, if you will. So she's looking at here's the income and here's the expenses. If we start to run short on the income side and we need to pull from savings because we have a big trip coming up or something like that, she will run that by me. Hey, I need to pull $1,000 out of savings. Is that okay? And maybe we'll have a conversation where it's like, well, what if we did this and this and only had to pull $500 out of savings? So that's where we have those kind of conversations. It's less about specific budgeting. She mentioned that when we go on a vacation, we're not budgeting anymore. We're not allocating a certain amount to that trip like we would have in the past, where we would have said, okay, we're only going to spend $1,000 or $750, and that's going to include all of our meals and everything. Now it's we're going to spend what we spend. And we just know ourselves well enough that we're not going to go crazy and we'll just feel it out as we go. And it might be $1,500, it might be $2,000, but that's going to be
Sure.
okay because that's the experience we wanted to have.
Right. I think that's really saying that you guys are optimizing for happiness as opposed to optimizing for the most cost efficient, trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that is important is being happy at the end of the day. And that's, I think, something that the entire Fi community has started to embrace more and more is the understanding that we need to focus more on not just the numbers overall. What you should be focusing on is having a better life on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, along every facet of the journey.
And it's an evolution. It takes a while to get there, depending on what your circumstances are coming into this journey. Because for us, it was all about a ton of debt, consumer debt, and we had to dig out of that first. So the money dates were a lot more critical for us back then. And then once we reached a certain level of comfort for how we manage our money, the money dates become less and less. So now it's just conversations. She might have something that she wants to talk about, and she's like, "Hey, let me just run a couple things by you really quick. We need to talk about this or that." And it's not like every Friday or it's not any set schedule for us. But how is it for you guys?
Yeah, for John and I would say it's similar in nature to you. Is I wouldn't have said that we have per se money dates. That more the conversational nature of needs that arise and saying, "Hey, I'd like to do this," or "I have this want," or hey, like kids need these things for school, or so and so wants to have a birthday party at XYZ. Are you fine with allocating this money for expenses? Then that's the type of conversational nature where we are at between Don and myself as well. Because it's a respect thing. Effective communication between partners is just giving your partner that awareness to say, hey, I'm planning on doing something. Are you okay with that? And ensuring that, hey, maybe there's something like I'm getting ready to go spend, you know, $500 or something. And Don's like, but what about this thing over here that you didn't think of at all? So it is just that check and balance, so to speak, that it's not like an approval so much as just making sure that we're both aware.
Mm-hmm. I think if I think back to when I first was introduced to the concept of a money date, I remember thinking that, oh, this sounds so great. This is going to be so much fun. I don't remember where I heard it the first time, but it was like, hey, let's have a bottle of wine and maybe it's a quiet time that we're together, and then we can go through the spreadsheets and we can go through the line items. And for me, being a money nerd, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's do this. And I think I presented it to Lori, or I tried to set it up and I tried to set the mood or whatever. But then I tried to start going through things with a line item approach and talk through it, and I lost her. She wasn't interested.
Yeah.
She understood where I was trying to go, but wasn't really feeling the line item approach to talking through the budget in that situation. So she's more of like, hey, let's get together in our home office and talk to it. The Let's keep the dating stuff to the date. We don't need to
To the
combine the
dating.
two.
Yeah, you don't need to mix these things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, the bottle of wine and candlelight spreadsheet
Yeah.
approach wasn't exactly a slam dunk, huh?
No.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna challenge myself. Don and I haven't had that same conversation. And I'm not saying it has to be this veiled romantic thing while trying to talk finance, but I think it is important to have time set aside specifically to talk about this. And only this, right? Is like today, what it looks like in practice for me is I disappear, I do my spreadsheet magic, whatever, out pops some numbers, and then I walk up to Dawn and I say, "Hey, what do you think our savings rate was this month?" Um, and she probably rolls her eyes and spits out a number at me, or whatever. We play the guessing game for a few seconds, but like that's not really probably meeting the needs for either one of us. And so I'm going to take that on as a challenge for the next time that we meet. That I'm going to ask Dawn about seeing if we can set aside time to have a quote unquote money date, and we'll see what it looks like.
You just want to have the one for now and see
Yeah.
if there's another one.
Make sure that it is enjoyable for both of us. What is the goal that I'm trying to accomplish
Mhm.
by having this? We both feel like we're communicating effectively. We're both empowered to understand where we are financially and be enabled to take action.
I think that's a great idea. I can't wait to hear how it went.
Yeah, you'll get to see my swan dive into the water, so to speak. So hopefully it ends well.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
I actually had a thought here. I don't know if this is the right place to add it, but one of the things that Lori and I have done well that's kind of money date adjacent is to have an annual discussion of what our goals are going to be for the year. Do you guys do anything like that?
We don't.
No? This is
And
something
I,
that I think I may have learned from Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets
uh-huh.
years ago, where he would talk about how he and his wife would go out to dinner. Now, this is a little bit more of a romantic setting, and it's something that Lori has enjoyed doing together, where we would go out like around the New Year time frame, and we would get, try to find a quiet place and just talk through what we wanted the next year of our lives to look like. So it could be things like, what kind of projects do we want to do around the house? What kind of time do we want to spend with other people? What kind of trips do we want to go on? How much money do we want to save? What other kind of special volunteer projects do we want to, like, all whatever we think we might do for throughout the year, we'll write it all down. And I wouldn't even say we revisit it very often. Sometimes we don't really look at it, but it's just the fact that we're having that kind of open conversation, it kind of helps to put us into that direction for the year. And then
Mm-hmm.
we sometimes will look back whenever we're doing the next year and look back on what did we say for last year and did we accomplish those things over the course of the year. And a lot of times we come pretty darn close to it without even really trying so much. It's just, and so maybe that the money date thing can work similar to that as well, where it doesn't have to be all that frequent, but like, here's the things we want to accomplish and here's where we're currently at. And it just kind of sets the wheels in motion without having the ongoing continuous conversation on.
No, that's a great idea. I have heard other people kind of talk about that, and yeah, I think that sounds great. Are there any other things that get in the way of having good budgeting or money dates, in your opinion?
Yeah, from my experience, I would say that I get too much into the weeds at times and want to look at the specifics of things whenever we were trying to really budget more strictly. Kind of to your example earlier, when our kids were younger, there would be expenses that we wouldn't necessarily have in the budget. I would struggle with trying to look at all those things and then trying to fine tune it. And then Lori was just like, well, that's just a one time expense. It's lumpy, and you need to understand that it's going to be lumpy over time. It took me a little while to embrace that. And, now having like the anti budget, it's so much easier. But I think from my perspective, just that, as well as then kind of poking at the other person or throwing around accusations of you spent too much in this category or whatever it might be, that can certainly cut the money date short real fast.
Yep, yep, yeah. I mean, other ways that you could simply erode, especially in a relationship, is just, you know, turning this into a way to kind of throw needles at each other
Mhm.
or just really turn one person off from talking about money because that's what they associate with, oh, we're going to talk about money. So yes, you
Yeah.
certainly want to turn it into blames and arguments. That certainly isn't what you want to accomplish.
Yeah. And over complicating the process. That's something that I was guilty of at one point too. I remember early on when I discovered all of this stuff, I'm not joking, Elliot. I put together like a 10-page PowerPoint presentation that I shared with Lori one day. And I was like, hey, and I thought it was like great. Here's, it had debt, it had a plan, it had savings over a period of time, it had all these things. And she was like, can you just talk to me like a real person?
She didn't sign that contract at the end. You didn't get your promotion, and yeah,
Right. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
yeah, absolutely.
Keep it
Just
simple.
realize, keep it simple.
Yep.
Well, in summary, I mean, I think we would say that budgeting is really about awareness, not punishment, right? No matter where you are in that spectrum of the beginning where you need to adhere to a real strict budget, or all the way on the opposite extreme of kind of the anti budget, whatever you want to call it, um, it's not meant to hurt anybody. It's to inform better decision making in the future, right? And so that is the first thing that you want to always take away from the idea of budgeting is it's to inform better decision making in the future.
Yeah, and just find the system that works best for you and your spouse or partner. Everybody's going to be a little different, and we've experienced all kinds of different formats over the years. We've gotten to a spot now that works well for us. Getting too much into the details helped us to get to this stage, but it wasn't always easy, and we had to continue to evolve and learn from the process along the way.
Yeah. And maybe money dates are that romantic bottle of wine by candlelight discussion for you, but it doesn't have to be that either, right? It can be that as simple as those touch points throughout daily life to say, this is something that I'm looking at doing. How do you feel about that? And really just making it more conversational in nature and making sure that you and your partner are really aligned in your vision.
Yeah. And so maybe a challenge to the listener. Set aside maybe a 30-minute point in time this week where you can get together with your partner or spouse and just talk through what do you think your money date should look like. And maybe if you can take it a step further, you can talk through where did your money go last month or last week, or where do you think it's going to go next month or next week? And that's it. Keep it simple.
Yeah, Precisely. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this money date concept with Don and I will turn into a Pinterest worthy board that I'll have to set a vision board for our first money date, but I would be surprised.
I
So
like the idea of the next topic, the next show that's going to come out. It's going to be reflections of Elliot and Don's first money date.
that's right. Yes.
we,
We shall see where it goes, but we want to close here. You can sign up our maybe sometime in the future newsletter. You can sign up on our list on 9 to 5 pod.com, and that's all spelled out NINETOFIPOD.com. And whether you're listening to us on YouTube or on any podcast player, like, subscribe, give us a review. We'd really appreciate hearing from you. So, with that, we can close.
yep,
It's good to
sounds
talk to you
good.
as always.
You too, Elliot.
All
See ya.
right, take it easy.